Hello, and welcome to volume 27 of the Bellringer, an extraordinary number, and we're in for a terrific talk today. We're going to be discussing the Cryptoverse. When is startup not a startup? Assessing viability and the critical necessity of due diligence with Erika Knierim. Erika is an attorney, legal engineer, and finance professional with over 14 years experience working with organizations ranging from international investment banks to multi-billion-dollar technology startups. After working for many years as a Cook County public defender, she transitioned into investment banking with William Blair and Celsius, then leading to her founding Nomic Consulting with a vision of helping legacy enterprise institutions navigate the challenges of adopting emerging technologies and unlocking the potential of tokenization, blockchain, and Industry 4.0 to change the world. She has spoken frequently on the importance of common sense regulation, including at our After the Bell events, and hopes that will pave the way for mass adoption of blockchain technology and the need for tech startups to take regulation and compliance seriously. I'd like to welcome Erika. Welcome to the Bellringer.
Thank you so much, Stacey, for having me here. It's always a pleasure.
Terrific. So let's get started. The first thing, when you're talking about a crypto firm, what are the first steps they need to take?
That's a great question. So say that you are talking to your friends and you think, I want to get into a startup. I want to be in the Cryptoverse. I want to do something in Web3. And you've got a great idea. Mm-hmm. Usually it does start out with the tech. The first step, and this is so critical, and it's the thing that I see so many people miss when they start a crypto firm, is do your due diligence on who your market is and who your market competitors are. I have so many people who I've had conversations with, and they come to me and they say, we're the first company to do this. And a quick Google search reveals they are absolutely not the first company to do this. And further, that the reason that this hasn't really reached popularity is either there's some huge legal hurdle that they have to overcome, or a financial hurdle they have to overcome, or there's no, regulatory infrastructure for this product. And so the first step is due diligence, just all across the board. Now, one of the things I see in this space is that people create pitch decks. They no longer do a business plan. Now, I don't necessarily disagree with that, but one of the things that a business plan does for a company is it really makes you go through all of those steps. So before you ever get in front of a VC firm, definitely do your due diligence. And let's talk about the VC firms. So let's say that you've done your due diligence, you have a great product, you have great tech, and you have something to bring to a VC. Do your due diligence on your VCs as well. You really want your VC to be somebody who can go to bat for you, who can sit on your board eventually, who will really make the introductions that you need to succeed. And they have to be there with you. If they're just throwing money at you, although you might be tempted to take it, in this space, there are so many people and so much money that it's very unlikely that you'll succeed by rising to the top because you won't have somebody to be there as your advocate. So by doing your due diligence, you also want to make sure that you're looking into who this VC is and who comprises the investors in the VC. Right now, governance is the word of the day, right? I think it's going to be the word of 2023. And one of the governance components, is checking that your values align with the values of the people who give you money. Because once people start digging, we see in the news, especially after post FTX, who gave FTX money? And we started asking those people questions. So if you don't want people asking questions about where you got your money, then don't take the money from that person. If you do not align from a mission, vision, values perspective with your VC, this is not going to be a successful endeavor. Your VC is going to have a lot of power and a lot of decision-making power in how your company moves forward and how they push you, either towards pure profit, pure output, or a balance of process and output and growing responsibly. So that VC component is also really important. And then finally, the third point I would say in preparing to take your company to the next level is know your risk tolerance. This is a changing environment. I mean, Stacey, we picked a great day. I woke up this morning and saw that the SEC had asked Paxos to stop issuing Binance stablecoins. This is a huge representation of just how quickly an entire section of the ecosystem can change overnight.
Right.
So knowing your risk tolerance, knowing that you're getting into a business that you have to be agile at every single moment. You can never be too married to your product. You have to know the regulatory infrastructure and be able to pivot appropriately.
That's very interesting. And I know when I was reading about Nomic that you have something called adults in the room. And I love that phrase. I really do. Because there are, there is a lot of challenge when you're talking about a startup. So can you define what you mean by that?
Absolutely. So I spent some time in a crypto company, and I think anybody who's worked at a crypto exchange or, any larger crypto entity over the last few years has had this feeling where you're on a Zoom call and you're hearing things and you're just asking yourself, is there an adult in the room? And this is a phrase that kept coming up as I was reading the post FTX, journal, or I'm sorry, the post-mortem FTX articles that were coming out, is everyone kept asking, where were the adults in the room? And we felt that this was just such a great representation. So we created the AITR protocol, or Adults in the Room protocol. And this is a protocol that is the foundation for everything that we do at Nomic. And when we come into a startup, for example, or a service provider in the crypto space, we actually have conversations with all of the stakeholders. We want to know, do you have the appropriate regulatory infrastructure? Do you have regulation at the core of your business? Do you understand what regulation applies to you? And then looking at the individuals who are in positions like a CEO, a COO, the chief legal officer, and asking the questions to determine whether those people actually have the skills and experience to do the things that are required to take a company like that to the next level. I've heard a lot of talk about how VCs don't care about that anymore. And they never have. From what I hear this all the time. They don't care. They don't care as long as you are making a 5-year exit and giving them their return on investment. But I don't think that that's the future. I think that there are a lot of VCs who are taking a step back and starting to put in positions within their VC firms, or even in private equity. They're hiring individuals who will go inside these companies to determine whether or not those companies are viable from a governance perspective. Here we come back to governance, right? With governance at the core, with governance at the center of everything that's going to happen moving forward in a post-FTX world, AITR protocol is a foundation where we can actually say to our clients, our end clients who are asking us to build things in the Web3 space, in the metaverse, or just to explore what tokenization means for their business. So we can say to those people, we have assessed these service providers, we have assessed these companies, and we believe that they meet a certain level of competence that you're not going to be on the front cover of the New York Times for something like what happened with FTX.
Sure. So when you're talking to these companies, what do you advise them to ensure that they're on track, both financially and legally?
Oh, that's a very complicated question. It really depends on what kind of business.
And I know that can be far longer than our 15 minutes, but, sort of just giving a taste, if I was a startup, like what, some of the basic.
Well, I think this is a great moment to say that nothing that I've said during this conversation is financial advice or legal advice.
Exactly.
We're just, but these are conversations that I think these companies should look to, because it's sort of gives you a framework. And to answer your question, it really is, are you working, let's start with the legal side. Are you working with a lawyer before you even kind of launch a product? Do you have a law firm that specializes in digital assets and or cryptocurrency? We saw a lot of law firms throw their hat in the ring in a pre-FTX world, claiming that they have digital asset experience. But when you talk to some of the lawyers behind the scenes, they're really just kind of brushing up on the space or asking questions, and they don't know the fundamentals of what this space is. This can be true of also the finance, finance area. So there were a lot of questions about the companies that came in, for example, with FTX, and I use FTX because that seems to have been the poster child, so to speak. They were not by any stretch of the imagination the only firm that really suffered in this, 2022 and earlier space in terms of being financially and legally viable. But what we saw across the board was, consulting firms, accounting firms, and law firms coming in with absolutely no experience, but they wanted to seem relevant. They wanted to be able to provide those services, and they felt we'll figure it out. This is not just a space you can brush up onto for 2 weeks and figure it out. You really have to understand how the fundamentals, how the tech works, and what the legal infrastructure is, not just in the United States, but in a global capacity.
Mhm.
This really is extremely complicated and involves a lot of different lawyers. So to take this back to what do you need? Work with a law firm that specializes in this area, who is really able to give you the advice that you're going to need. Now, I'll make one point on this, is that right now we have, crypto lawyers and blockchain lawyers, but this is very analogous to what we saw in the turn of the millennium with internet lawyers. At the time, internet lawyers were new and they were specialists. But now internet lawyers are just called lawyers because the internet is so pervasive and it's in everything we do. We have to know, just as lawyers, what it means to have an internet presence. And so I fully anticipate that not only in the law and in finance and in these other areas, we're going to see that transition where everyone's going to need to know. But at the moment, you need to ask those questions. Who are your former clients? Do you have any people we can speak to? And the same goes to the finance, the area of finance. Are you working with investment banks or VCs who are specialists in this area, who have the ability, like I said earlier, to make the introductions, to know how to value these assets appropriately? And the same thing with an accountant, really working with an accountant who has experience in this area.
Sure. Now, there's a lot of competition in this area now, a lot of startups. So what can a startup do today to get some traction?
So there are a lot of different entry points. One is the sort of VC space, which we've talked a little bit about.
Right.
Partnering, for example, with an A16Z is obviously going to give you a launching point to the stratosphere, right? This is one of the most well-known VC firms, and they're really well-known in this space. But let's say that you aren't able to get funding from them, really kind of getting and you've gotten funding from somebody who is is really not well-known, or just kind of some angel or seed. Oh, my dog agrees.
That's okay.
If A16Z is not investing in your company, then just reaching out to people who are in your space, creating partnerships, looking at people who have complementary businesses to yours. So for example, if you have a reg as a service product that is just one tiny little thing that you do, and you do it really, really well, you would want to partner with a company that could layer that on top of what they already have. So then you have a built-in client base. So really kind of do your due diligence in terms of understanding where in the ecosystem you fit as a company, and then partnering with those individuals. Now, what's really, I'm going to say, not new, but coming back around, is the idea of consortia. I think a couple of years ago, there were a lot of consortia that were popping up, and there's a couple of different iterations of consortia. So for example, Ethereum has a consortium. Some of the blockchain specific have consortium, but that's not exactly what I'm talking about. I'm actually talking about the industries. These industries understood that they really didn't know fully how this technology was going to impact their business. So they started to reach out to other people and say, well, why don't we partner together to research this space together? And we can share in the knowledge, reduce the risk, and reduce the cost. And at the end of it, if we do need or want to work together, we can do so. Now, this had some traction in the beginning, and a lot of it was led by blockchains. What we're seeing now is a revived conversation about this consortium idea, because there are so many different blockchains, and most companies don't necessarily want to pigeonhole themselves to one blockchain that might not be the right tech for them. We're really seeing that as this tech changes and as blockchains come in and out of fashion, some are rising to the top. I haven't spoken to anybody in the last 6 months who's willing to work with a blockchain that isn't EVM compatible. So, we're seeing these trends that are starting to take hold. And what that means is standardization is around the corner. So these consortium want to look at what is available to them, what's the right business partner for them. And then they want to speak to one another, because I think there's a real understanding at this stage in blockchain's evolution that in order for this to become widely adopted, that
Mhm.
we have to create standardization across the board. And we have to onboard several of the different points as we're talking about things like end-to-end asset management. In order for end-to-end asset management to work, for example, in the automobile industry, you have to really start at the very beginning. Where are these parts coming from? And you have to onboard all of those service providers. So
Mhm.
it's sort of this conversation. It takes a village to raise a child.
Uh-huh.
We're really in the infancy of blockchain, and these consortia are ways in which a company could introduce themselves to the consortia. They start to talk about what they're doing, and then the consortia says, oh wow, you're doing something specific to my industry. Great, we'd love to onboard you into our ecosystem. So that's another great way that a startup could gain traction and get their name out to the world.
Well, this has been really great, Erika. Really appreciate all your insights. As we all know, the Bellringer sort of gives us a little taste of an issue, and which we will be discussing further at one of our After the Bell events. So again, I'd like to thank Erika for her insight and her expertise, and thank you all for listening. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Bellringer or our upcoming After the Bell event. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.